Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Joe here with me, my co-host Dan,
Hello and greetings.
and we're reviewing the episode Counterbalance of Cobra-Kai, which the episode starts off with Miguel working out, bulking up, training through the months of November and December. The beginning of the episode's really good. Johnny is very pleased with his progress, and we then get Danny causing the rent to double, Aisha struggling with bullying, so she's kind of decides to join Cobra-Kai because she saw the ad online, and I think she saw the paper ad, and that's what directed her to the website. Later in the episode, we've got Danny, who gets a serious talking down or dressing down from Amanda, which in this case she's right. Danny behaved rather like Terry Silver, but it's because his journey over the course of the series, from what it's showing us, is that he was beaten down and ground down over the course of his marriage until he became the shadow archetype. He's not allowed to practice Miyagi-Do since Mr. Miyagi's death, so he essentially fell into becoming the shadow archetype, which means essentially at his core he became, well, maybe not at his core, but like he became the same character in a way as Terry Silver, because Terry Silver is the shadow magician archetype, the deceiver, and Danny's more the denying all innocent one, but he's got shades of the deceiver in him. But the thing is, Terry Silver was always a shadow archetype to Mr. Miyagi. That said, Danny starts to realize what's wrong with him, visits the tomb of Mr. Miyagi at the cemetery, and realizes where he's gone wrong to some extent. That he had suppressed Miyagi-Do. That he was never supposed to. That this is basically his life, his very soul. So, he essentially unburies the katana, so to speak, that is to say his soul, unburies his soul from where it lies in the cemetery, and vows to restore balance to his life. And at the end of the episode, he gloriously puts on his gi and the bandana of the Miyagi-Do, like the kind of shining sun of Japan, except blue, of the Miyagi-Do clan, which the Miyagi-Do outfits always had for the bandana the shining sun of Japan's navy, or historically the World War I and II flag of Japan, and on the back behind the bonsai tree, the modern Japanese flag. Now these days, though, the shining sun is more an emblem of the Japanese navy, which is actually one of the most interesting navies in the world. Just to comment on that. They have a very rich history. And so you've got this mixture of Japanese history there, combined with the Miyagi family's history in North America, so that Danny, as you've pointed out several times, is more Japanese in some ways than Italian American. Now, this is where I'm gonna propose a theory. This is why, to a lot of people, Rocky is more of an icon in some ways of Americanism in America, and even Superman, than Danny LaRusso. Danny LaRusso is essentially, at his core, a mixed heritage character. Mixed heritage of Japanese and Italian American. But in some ways more Japanese than he is Western. So the thing there is that, yeah, he's all about balance, but in the Japanese sense to a large extent. He's more Eastern, because he was essentially adopted by Mr. Miyagi. So you can't really judge him or completely view him without that Japanese lens, which makes him a very fascinating character in some ways. In a lot of ways more fascinating than, say, and I am a big fan of these characters, Superman or Rocky, but he belongs in the East to an extent. And I kind of think that this episode managed to do one thing at the end with Danny quite right, in that they don't always do throughout the series, which is a mistake. It's that they direct in the way the camera angles, the way it's done, is produced, is in an American style. When that's wrong, it should be shot in a Japanese style. Because that's the thing. Like, Karate Kid 2 was more a Japanese style film. It's using Japanese film techniques. It feels like a Japanese film that just so happens to have an American lead and I guess you could say it's partially shot in English, but it feels Japanese. And maybe that's why it might be my favorite as well, like you, of the Karate Kid movies, because I prefer Japanese cinema to a large extent to American cinema or Western cinema to a large extent. I don't know, I just prefer Japanese cinema. So in that regard, I think that Danny should have been shot more with that Karate Kid 2 style of cinema. Whereas better contrast him with Johnny, who should be shot purely in an American style.
Especially when he's emptying out the old dojo and Miyagi's old house.
Yeah, which is symbolic of Danny taking everything that's not working in his life. Yes, it's past memories since Mr. Miyagi died, but he's emptying his mental space, I think, in order to restore balance to it, to restore the Japanese element to it.
Because you have stuff like baby strollers, baby toys. You've got the pool noodles that the kids use during...
Oh, yeah. So there's some stuff that's been there before Mr. Miyagi's death, but the trouble is, Danny shoved it all in there so as not to look at the old dojo.
It took the place of...
Yeah, when it can't. He needed to actually, I think, in a way, jettison all that stuff. Throw it all out. Because it is the mundane that does not matter to an extent. Yes, his kids matter, but his kids no longer are living in that world where they're working with tricycles and whatnot. They're teenagers. He is still living in that time period of his life when he can't. His life is out of balance. He needs to jettison what doesn't work. In a way, the child that doesn't want to grow up and finally grow up. But at the same time, he needs to embrace the original child, the hero archetype Danny from Karate Kid 1 through 3. He needs to embrace that young boy. He's been denying him. But now, the adult Danny and the child Danny, who are pulling at each other, have finally started to refuse together into what he was meant to be, which is to be the Grandmaster of Miyagi-Do.
And with what we've commented before, we could kind of guess what caused him to shove all of that extra stuff in there.
Yeah, and to deny that he was part of Miyagi's legacy.
And he's getting control of his life now.
Yeah.
Or wanting to start getting control back.
Yeah, I think him lowering the kanji scroll and restoring the pictures and the bonsai tree and everything to the dojo and finally doing katas was him starting to retake control, like you said, and starting to restore the balance. And yeah, this is where, as much as they have this tender moment with Amanda and him, where she smiles as he's doing all this, in the next episode she belittles his efforts, and that kind of undermines her character in this episode, where she was written just to say right. And once again, we're gonna whine. This is where if they had gone with Kumiko, because they could have, there would have been a better balance between the characters, and you would have seen that this just moment would feel even more tender and appropriate. But I just think that they should have focused on, if they had gone with Kumiko, I'm going to make the case for the ship, it's that Danny is essentially marrying into the Miyagi family, in a way, because she is a relative of Yukie, and thus she would have been essentially Miyagi's step-niece. And she is a distant cousin, because a lot of the Okinawans of that village, of Tony Village, some of them were probably relatives of each other. I'm not saying it's inbred. I'm just saying that I'm pretty sure that there must have been some families that were distantly related to each other. But I'm just saying, I always got the feeling she was kind of almost as closely related to Miyagi through probably like her father as she was for her mother to Yukie, because Kumiko's mom was Yukie's younger sister. And I think that if they had tied her in that way with Mr. Miyagi, it would have felt appropriate because, in a way, at least in Japanese literature, because this is harkening back to Genji Monogatari and the Kojiki, where Danny would be stepping into this literary legacy, where he has his mentor, like Genji does with his own mentors, but it involves marrying a relative of your master. Because you are his adoptive son, you marry his biological daughter or his distant niece. And that's how it generally works in Japanese literature if you're a newcomer into the family. And if you look at modern Japanese corporate families and political families, they often do that. So you've got Danny, who essentially, I think they should have steeped him more into this Japanese literature, in a way, in this literary tradition, to juxtapose him even more of Johnny. Because at that point, Johnny is going to feel all American, while in some ways, Danny will feel almost as much Japanese as he is Italian. Because the problem with Karate Kid 2 is that it is a problem, in a way. I love that film, but it put Danny in the context of Japanese lit in films, not American ones. So you kind of... The problem is, you have to lean in, I think. And that kind of removes him from the Americanism, in a way. But Johnny is all-American. You have to keep him all-American in a way, which they do throughout this series. So you need to use both to advocate for both cultures in a way. Japanese Americanism and, in turn, just pure Americanism. And juxtapose them against each other, in a way, with film techniques. But they didn't do that. It's all American techniques for the most part. But this episode counterbalances Japanese techniques versus American ones. Japanese psychology, in a way, versus American psychology. And they're very, very, very different cultures. Japanese culture in the West has more in common with probably French culture than it does American culture. And American culture is a derivative of English and Irish culture. It is. And even to an extent, some Spanish culture. But some. That's just because there's a lot of Latin people in America. And so you have these total opposites.
I just thought of something near the end. You know how Amanda walked away as Danny was emptying the dojo? I'm wondering, why didn't she start helping to bring some of the stuff out?
Well, I guess you could say there's a separation of sorts between the two. I think, spiritually.
What would Kumiko do?
She might do the same thing, but I see her maybe bringing tea to Danny, or just standing in the doorway, just smiling, and then, like, she sometimes did that sort of thing. Well, on the other hand, she was a fairly active character, so she might help empty it, and then just later bring tea. You got to bear in mind, it's the Yamato Nadeshiko's archetype. She's going to go fetch him tea and cookies, probably, and then probably just challenge him to find a new place to put all that stuff. And maybe build a new wall like Mr. Miyagi was doing in Karate Kid 2. Remember that one new part of the house? She might try to apply that, because you got to bear in mind she's basically a female Mr. Miyagi.
Yeah, and this might add to the criticism of Amanda. How many times does she do physical labor compared to other characters?
Never. But
I mean, Carmen does some physical labor. Yeah.
But that said, Amanda in this episode truly contributes. Mm-hmm. We shouldn't be too hard on the character. And you know what? We're not being hard on the actress. The actress is a very good actress. She has very expressive eyes. And no, I actually think she does. She's very attractive.
She does her role really well. And yeah, in here, she does put things in perspective, and she does tell Danny, hey, yeah, you can't do that. That's wrong.
And to be quite honest, it might sound weird, but she would have been one of my first choices for maybe a role like either Galadriel, if she were to dye her hair, or even Baylet. Because I know some people will say, well, there's this actress or this actress who are younger and more beautiful. Yes, but the actress for Amanda is truly talented. Like, she's a very skilled actress. I'd even propose her to an extent for the role of Wonder Woman. If only due to just her acting chops.
I actually see that.
Because Ralph Macchio himself handpicked her for her role. Because he had acted opposite her, I think, a few times before. From what I understand, he understood that she was a very talented actress who understood her craft and is solely dedicated to her craft as an actress. So I just think that give credit where credit is due. She's talented and skilled. She should get more roles. I just don't like the character of Amanda.
Maybe Amanda and Danny would be better off as friends.
I don't know about that. It's just the way the character is written. I don't think they'd be good friends. She's very toxic. But the actress is really good and should get more roles because she's a good actress. That said, the arc for Johnny is to try to cover his rent, and the thing is, at the end of the episode, Johnny gets a bit of good news because Miguel beat the snot out of Kylar and his buddies, which is fun and a great scene. And then he's standing like it's like almost on a throne or something on a cafeteria table after beating the snot out of them. I just love Aisha there at the beginning of the fight going, "No mercy!"
She gets really into the...
She was like...
one of my old teachers who...
loved Macbeth just for the bloodshed.
Yeah.
She loved Macbeth and Hamlet. I only had her for one class when I finally reached high school.
I remember watching one of the movies of Macbeth.
And she complained that there wasn't enough blood, right?
Actually, at the end, when one character is decapitated, she had to play rewind, play, like at least 5 times.
That's who Aisha reminds me of. Yeah, okay, I get that. Like, Aisha's actress is so good. I honestly hate that they wrote her out of the series. She was such a great character.
And it's funny how the best advertisement for Johnny was YouTube. Modern technology.
Even though Johnny hates modern technology, which is awesome. But then you've got...
Just wait till he sees the footage of...
I like how it was Miguel's Yaya who picked up the phone and who was pleased and vowed never to tell Carmen. I think Carmen later finds out. But it's probably after the end of season 1. After Miguel wins the tournament.
Yeah, because she's a mom. The last thing mothers want is for their sons to get caught up in fights.
But, yeah.
And I think his abuela is focused a lot more on an older style. If you've got a bully, you beat the crap out of them to...
Well, yeah, but he calls her his Yaya. Which I think is probably supposed to be a cuter form of grandmother. Yeah. That said, you've got Sam, meanwhile, who seems extremely pleased in a very particular way with how Miguel beat the snot out of Kyler, which is just such a funny scene. Mary Mouser truly does a good job showing how enchanted Sam is in that moment, and how much she probably feels like a princess, which is a funny moment. Like, that's the thing. I dislike a lot of the criticism leveled at Mary Mouser as an actress and also the character of Sam, because I like most of the actors and actresses in this show, I really like Sam's character. When I first viewed the first season, I didn't like her. And then went into the second season not really liking her. But then when I rewatched Cobra-Kai the second time, I really liked her character.
As much as we criticize some of the characters and whatnot, we do like a lot of aspects of it.
Yeah.
Even Amanda, there are things that we like about her.
Yeah, that's the beauty of Cobra-Kai. It's just such a great series in that regard. I just wish there was more they could have done, and they should have done, in hindsight, to tie things in with the Karate Kid movies. That said, Sam is one of the best parts of this show. Oh, and we also have Robbie, who's conning his way into the LaRusso Auto Group. That said, let's rate this episode. I'm going to say this is a 3.3.
I'm on the same boat.
This is a really good episode.
Yeah.
So, with that in mind, don't forget to smash that like and subscribe button as though you were Danny smashing I don't know, maybe chosen into the pavement